Chapter 1. The rain lashed across Calliope's face, stinging like shattered glass. She slipped in the slick mud, her bare hands scraping against jagged rocks as she clawed her way up the steep embankment. Her chest felt as though it were filled with fire, each ragged breath a tight, agonizing knot. She pressed a trembling hand over her stomach, a desperate shield for the tiny 3-month-old life growing inside her. They were closing in. Gareth's debt collectors moved relentlessly through the trees behind her, their flashlight beams cutting through the suffocating darkness like predator eyes. The scent of wet pine and damp earth could not mask the sharp metallic tang of fear sweating from her pores. She breached the tree line, stumbling blindly onto the slick asphalt of the coastal highway. The sudden roar of an engine shattered the storm's howling. Blinding halogen headlights painted her in stark, unforgiving white. She froze, a deer caught in the inevitable rush of death. Tires shrieked against the wet road. The acrid scent of burning rubber choked the air. Calliope hit the hood of the sleek, black convertible with a dull thud, rolling backward onto the freezing pavement. A car door slammed. Heavy boots crunched on the asphalt. "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" a voice demanded. It was a dark, resonant rumble that vibrated straight through to her marrow. Calliope looked up. The man towering over her was colossal. Rain plastered a tailored suit to his broad shoulders. His eyes, glowing an unnatural, luminous amber in the headlights, locked onto hers. Vandar, the Alpha King, the notorious playboy of the Western Territories. "Please," Calliope choked out, scrambling backward. "They're going to kill me." Shadows detached themselves from the edge of the woods, the debt collectors. Vandar did not hesitate. He reached down, his imposing grip closing around her wrist. Heat seared through her ice-cold skin at the contact. He hauled her off the pavement and shoved her into the passenger seat of the convertible. "Keep your head down," he ordered, sliding behind the wheel. The engine roared, tires spitting gravel as the car tore down the highway, leaving the shadowy figures behind in the torrential rain. Calliope shivered uncontrollably, water dripping from her matted hair. She hugged her knees to her chest, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could not trust him. Gareth had proved that men only leave ruins behind. "Drink this," Vandar said, tossing a silver flask into her lap. She stared at it, then at his profile carved from granite. "Who are you?" "Your salvation," he replied smoothly, eyes fixed on the winding road. "I need a bride. The elders of my council are threatening to force my abdication by midnight if I do not present a Luna. My reputed lifestyle has tired them." Calliope blinked, the cold seeping into her bones. "A bride? I am pregnant with another man's child. I am hunted." "I do not care," Vandar stated. His voice was absolute. "You need protection. I need a wife. We sign a contract tonight. You wear my ring, you smile for the court, and I obliterate the debts of whoever is chasing you. A mutually beneficial transaction." Maternal instinct coiled tight in her chest. A life for a life, a cage for a shield. She looked at his hands gripping the steering wheel, strong and unyielding. She nodded once. The car suddenly jerked. A crushing impact struck the passenger side. Calliope screamed as the convertible skidded sideways, stopping inches from the guardrail. 3 enormous wolves stepped into the glow of the headlights. The debt collectors had shifted, their fangs bared, saliva dripping onto the wet road. Vandar unbuckled his seatbelt. The casual playboy facade vanished, replaced by something ancient and terrifying. "Stay in the car." He stepped out into the storm. The air pressure dropped. A towering shadow erupted from his form, bones cracking and reforming in a fluid, violent dance. Where the man stood, a colossal black wolf now remained. His fur absorbed the light. His amber eyes burned like hellfire. He was supposed to negotiate. He was supposed to use his royal authority. Instead, the black wolf froze. His massive head snapped back toward the car. He stared directly through the windshield at Calliope. Her scent, rain, fear, and something impossibly sweet hit him. The beast lost all control. He threw his head back to the weeping sky. A roar tore from his throat, shaking the very foundations of the earth, echoing with absolute primal possession. My Mate, Chapter 2. The iron gates of Crimson Crest loomed like the jagged teeth of a beast. Vandar steered the battered convertible through them, the tires grinding over the gravel driveway. The towering Gothic estate sat bathed in deep shadows, entirely isolated from the rest of the world. Calliope trembled in the passenger seat. The echo of that feral roar still rattled in her skull. My mate. She wrapped her arms tighter around her stomach. The scent of ozone and spilled blood lingered on his clothes. He had dispatched the debt collectors with terrifying, absolute efficiency. The grand double doors swung open as the car halted. Barnaby, a slender man wearing a pristine tailored vest, hurried down the wet stone steps. He took one look at the dented car, the crimson stained on Vandar's knuckles, and the shivering, mud-soaked woman. Another living problem, sire, Barnaby sighed. He pulled a spotless white handkerchief from his pocket to wipe a smear of grime from the car door. I just had the upholstery detailed. Prepare the east wing, Vandar ordered. His voice was a low, vibrating hum that commanded instant obedience. He walked around the hood and opened her door. He did not grab her. Instead, he offered his hand. Calliope stared at his upturned palm. The heat radiating from his towering frame was palpable in the freezing rain. She ignored his offer, climbing out on her own. Her wet shoes slipped slightly on the slick stones. Vandar's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek, but he let his hand fall to his side. Inside, the mansion was a cavern of mahogany and dark velvet. A fire roared in the grand hearth, casting flickering golden light across the opulent rugs. The rules are simple, Vandar said, standing near the flames. He poured a glass of amber liquid for himself, but handed her a crystal goblet of warm milk instead. You stay within the estate. You attend the galas on my arm. You play the devoted Luna for 1 year. In exchange, no one touches you. The child takes my name. They will be protected by my bloodline. Calliope wrapped her freezing fingers around the warm glass. And after a year, you are free to go. He lied. His inner wolf clawed viciously at his ribs, howling at the mere thought of her leaving. The beast demanded he claim her right now, on the velvet rug. He took a rigid step closer. His hand reached out, stopping just an inch from her damp, tangled hair. He grabbed a thick, heated towel from a nearby chair and draped it gently over her head. His knuckles briefly brushed her cheek. The touch sent a jolt of sheer electricity straight to her core. Calliope gasped softly, her eyes darting up to his. His amber gaze was dark, burning with a possessive intensity that contradicted every cold word of his contract. Barnaby will show you to the phone, Vandar said roughly, taking a sharp step back as if burned. Call your family. 10 minutes later, locked safely inside the lavish East Wing suite, Calliope dialed Lottie's number. Callie, where are you? Lottie's voice shrieked through the receiver. I went to your apartment. The door was completely shattered. I am safe, Lottie. I am at Crimson Crest. A stunned pause followed. The king's estate. Callie, Blink twice if you are being held hostage. I swear to the goddess I will bring my cast-iron frying pan and bash that playboy's skull in." A small fractured smile touched Calliope's lips. It was the first time she had smiled in days. "I am okay. It is a strict business arrangement." Before Lottie could interrogate her further, a blaring siren shattered the quiet of the mansion. The noise was deafening. Flashing red lights painted the cream walls of the suite in alarming crimson strokes. Calliope dropped the receiver. She ran to the window, pressing her palms against the cold glass. Down at the main entrance, the reinforced iron gates lay twisted and broken. Rain poured over a dozen mercenaries cloaked in dark, heavy fabric. At their center stood Gareth. He did not look like the cowardly ex-boyfriend who had abandoned her. He looked unhinged, his eyes wide and manic, radiating a dark, unnatural energy. "Vandar!" Gareth screamed, his voice amplified over the roaring storm. "Deliver her to me. Hand over the woman and the bastard in her womb, or I will level this entire mountain to dust." Chapter 3. The air inside the grand foyer turned to lead. Vandar walked out onto the front steps, leaving the safety of the heavy oak doors. His presence alone crushed the oxygen from the atmosphere. He did not shift. He did not raise his voice. He simply let his alpha aura expand. It was a physical, suffocating weight. The approaching mercenaries stumbled in the mud. Several fell to their knees, gasping for air as their lungs refused to work. Gareth's manic smile faltered. The rogue was forced to bow his head under the sheer, imposing pressure of the king. "You trespass on royal ground," Vandar stated coldly, his voice vibrating over the roaring storm. "Take your curs and leave before I paint my driveway with your blood." Gareth choked on his own breath, eyes darting to the shadowed windows of the east wing. He spat a mouthful of dark blood onto the gravel. "This isn't over." He signaled his men, and they vanished back into the unforgiving night. To silence the escalating whispers and solidify the absolute power of their contract, Vandar moved swiftly. 3 nights later, the Crimson Gala commenced. The ballroom was a masterpiece of gold and blood-red silk. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, casting fractured light across the polished marble floor. The elite of the Werewolf Society, including the Conservative Council of Elders, watched the entrance with hawkish eyes. Calliope stood at the top of the grand staircase. She wore a gown of deep scarlet, the silk hugging the slight, barely noticeable curve of her stomach. As she descended, the room fell into a deafening silence. Vandar waited at the bottom. He wore a tailored black tuxedo, but nothing could hide the lethal grace of the predator lurking beneath. The scent of pine, rain, and raw, masculine power hit her senses. He offered his arm. She took it. The spark of heat between them was undeniable, singing through her veins. "Smile, little bird," he murmured close to her ear, his breath warming her skin. "The wolves are watching." He led her to the center of the floor as the orchestra began a slow, haunting waltz. He pulled her close. One hand rested firmly on her waist, the other clasped hers. He was a furnace against the sudden chill of the room. "They do not believe us," Calliope whispered. Her eyes caught the skeptical, calculating glares of the elders standing by the velvet curtains. "Then we make them believe," Vandar replied smoothly. He spun her, the motion pulling her flush against his chest. Calliope froze. She could hear his heartbeat. It was not the steady, calm rhythm of a detached, arrogant king. It was frantic. It was hammering like war drums beneath his ribs, betraying a wild, desperate energy. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The playboy facade, The cold contracts, the indifferent stares. They were walls. Beneath them, Vandar was profoundly, devastatingly lonely. He was terrified. Vandar's hand slid from her waist, moving slowly up her spine to the nape of her neck. His long fingers tangled in her hair, sending a violent shiver down her back. His amber eyes locked onto hers, asking for silent, absolute permission. She swallowed hard, her breath shallow, and gave a minute nod. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. It was supposed to be fake. It was supposed to be a theatrical show for the elders. But the moment their mouths met, a devastating current of sexual tension ignited. The air in the ballroom crackled. Calliope gasped softly into his mouth. Vandar groaned, pulling her tighter against his solid frame, his tongue sweeping along her lower lip with possessive hunger. Her hands flew to his lapels, gripping the dark fabric to keep her trembling knees from giving out. The kiss was consuming. It was melting the thick ice around her fractured heart, piece by piece. When he finally pulled away, they were both breathless. The elders were staring, completely silenced. Calliope opened her mouth to speak, but a sharp, sudden warmth bloomed deep in her abdomen. A blinding, ethereal silver light erupted from her stomach. It pierced straight through the scarlet silk of her gown, illuminating the entire ballroom with the terrifying brilliance of a fallen star. An overwhelming, ancient power flooded the room. It was not the heavy, crushing weight of an alpha. It was something pure, absolute, and commanding. Around the ballroom, crystal champagne glasses shattered in unison. The music stopped abruptly. One by one, the strongest wolves in the kingdom, including the haughty, unbending elders, found their knees buckling. They collapsed to the marble floor, forced to bow before the blinding light, radiating from the unborn child. Chapter 4. The spiritual advisor, a withered wolf with blind, milky eyes, trembled violently. He passed his frail, scarred hands over the glowing crystal orb. They sat enclosed in Vandar's private study. The heavy oak doors were bolted shut against the panicked whispers of the court. Calliope sat frozen on the leather sofa. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she clutched a thick woolen blanket around her shoulders. "The child is not a mere wolf," the advisor rasped. His voice echoed in the quiet, suffocating room. "It is a star woven, a celestial hybrid born once in a millennium." Calliope's breath hitched. Her pulse pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The lingering heat from Vandar's kiss still buzzed on her lips, but cold dread now washed over her skin. "They carry the magic of the night sky in their blood," the old wolf continued, bowing his head. "The power to mend shattered souls, the absolute power to resurrect the dead." Calliope felt the room spin. The air grew alarmingly thin, smelling faintly of ozone and burning wax. "Gareth is just a bartender. How can my baby be—" "Gareth is no bartender," Vandar interrupted. He stood rigidly by the roaring fireplace. The flames cast harsh, unforgiving shadows across his sharp jawline. He looked at the blind advisor, his amber eyes glowing with lethal intent. "Leave us." Once the old wolf scurried out, Vandar turned to face Calliope. The charming playboy mask was completely gone. In its wake remained a hardened, colossal warrior, shaped by grief. His scent, usually a comforting blend of pine and rain, turned sharp with metallic tension. "Gareth belongs to the Obsidian Circle," Vandar explained. His voice was a low, vibrating hum that carried a dangerous edge. "A dark, magic cult. They believe a star-woven heart can bring their ancient deity back to the mortal realm. Gareth did not abandon you because he was poor. He planted the seed. He left you isolated, so he could return and harvest the child, when the power finally manifested. Calliope stared at him. Her stomach dropped into a bottomless abyss. The pieces of her shattered life suddenly aligned into a horrifying picture. "You knew," she whispered. Her voice cracked, barely audible over the crackling fire. "You knew all of this." Vandar took a rigid step forward. His amber eyes were filled with raw, undeniable torment. 5 years ago, the Circle murdered my parents. I have played the drunken fool, the useless king to lower their guard. I tracked Gareth to your city. I planned to intercept him. I targeted you to protect the asset. Calliope stood up. The heavy blanket fell unheeded to the hardwood floor. The betrayal sliced through her chest, sharper than any physical blade. Her chest tightened so painfully she could barely draw breath. She was nothing but a pawn. "I am just an asset to you? A piece on your chessboard?" "No." Vandar closed the distance instantly. The towering Alpha King fell to his knees before her. He grabbed her trembling hands, pressing them desperately to his face. "At first, it was a mission, but when I pulled you into that car, when my wolf recognized your soul, Calliope, I love you. I am completely undone by you." Tears spilled hot and fast down Calliope's pale cheeks. She pulled her hands away from his grasp, stepping backward. "You lied to me. I thought I was safe. I thought you actually cared." Vandar looked up at her. The agony in his gaze was absolute, stripping him of all royal pride. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. "I do care. My wolf howls for you. Seeing you cry is tearing my soul apart." He reached out, his fingers brushing the empty air between them. Before he could speak again, the massive stained glass window behind his desk shattered inward. Glass rained across the study like jagged, deadly diamonds. The temperature in the room plummeted. A black arrow streaked through the air. Vandar spun with blinding speed, throwing his colossal frame in front of Calliope. The arrow grazed his broad shoulder. It tore through his tailored jacket, drawing a line of black, poisoned blood. The estate alarms began to scream, a piercing wail that vibrated in her teeth. Shadows poured through the broken window. Cult assassins, armed with gleaming silver blades, swarmed the study. The heavy oak doors burst open from the hallway. Lottie, Calliope's fierce best friend, was dragged brutally into the room. A jagged, rusted knife was pressed tight against her throat by a cloaked mercenary. "The king falls tonight," the lead assassin hissed, his eyes devoid of humanity. "And the Star Child comes with us." Chapter 5. "Barnaby!" Vandar roared, the command vibrating the very foundation of the study. From the shadowed corridor, a sleek silver cylinder rolled across the hardwood floor. It stopped precisely at the lead assassin's boots. Barnaby stepped calmly into the doorway. The butler wore a pristine tailored vest, heavy noise-canceling earmuffs, and a black tactical gas mask. The cylinder detonated. A localized blast of corrosive pale green foam sprayed outward. It was meticulously engineered. The chemical melted the cultists' dark cloaks and blistered their flesh in seconds, yet left Lottie entirely untouched. The mercenary holding her screamed, dropping his rusted blade. Lottie scrambled backward on her hands and knees, coughing violently. "The foyer is heavily soiled, sire," Barnaby announced over his mask's intercom. "I shall require extra bleach. Get them to the bunker," Vandar commanded. The poison from the arrow burned through his veins. The agony did not weaken him. It fueled the feral beast clawing at his chest. Vandar's bones fractured and reformed in a fluid, violent symphony. He did not shift into an ordinary wolf. He became the ancient, primal embodiment of the royal bloodline. He was colossal. His fur was blacker than the void, seeming to smoke with a dark, smoldering heat. His towering frame eclipsed the moonlight spilling into the room. Lethal claws gouged deep trenches into the polished floorboards. He threw himself at the remaining assassins. Hot blood sprayed the walls. The sickening sound of snapping bones echoed beneath the estate's blaring alarms. Vandar tore them limb from limb. He was an unstoppable force of ancient feral wrath. Barnaby shoved Calliope and Lottie down a hidden stairwell concealed behind the bookshelves. They tumbled into a reinforced underground bunker. The leaden steel door sealed shut above them with a deafening thud. The moment the lock clicked, Calliope dropped to the cold concrete floor. A violent, agonizing cramp ripped through her abdomen. She screamed, clutching her stomach. The dark magic leaking from the slaughtered cultists above was seeping through the very stones. It violently agitated the pure celestial energy of her unborn child. The conflicting magics tore her apart from the inside. "Callie!" Lottie cried out, dropping beside her in a panic. The bunker door groaned. The heavy steel hissed open. Vandar stumbled down the narrow stairs. He had shifted back to his human form. He was covered in enemy blood, his breathing uneven, his bare chest heaving. He saw Calliope writhing on the floor. The imposing Alpha King instantly dropped to his knees. "The dark magic," he rasped, pulling her into his arms. "It is poisoning the air. It is hurting our child. It hurts," Calliope sobbed. She buried her face into his blood-stained chest, inhaling his scent of rain and metallic copper. Vandar cradled her pale face. Hot tears tracked through the soot and gore on his cheeks. "I am sorry. I am so terribly sorry I brought this upon you. I swear on my very soul, I will give my life for yours." He pressed his forehead against hers. "There is only one way to shield you from this sorcery. My alpha blood. If I claim you, my aura will act as an absolute barrier. But you must choose this. You must let me in." Calliope looked into his desperate amber eyes. She saw the absolute truth there. The charming playboy was a ghost. The calculating manipulator was dead. All that remained was a man entirely willing to die for her. She reached up, her trembling fingers stroking his bruised cheek. "Do it," she whispered. She tilted her head back, baring the fragile skin of her throat. Vandar's eyes flared a brilliant molten gold. He let out a low, shuddering breath. Then he sank his fangs deep into the crook of her neck. The pain was a brief, sharp pinch. It was instantly swallowed by an inferno of heat. The claiming mark sealed their fates. The mating bond exploded between them, a rushing tide of pure adrenaline and merging souls. Warmth flooded Calliope's veins, instantly soothing her agonizing cramps. The baby's silver light pulsed steadily, stabilized by Vandar's protective darkness. But with the newly formed bond came a shared, terrifying vision. In her mind's eye, Calliope saw the jagged mountain peak outside. Gareth stood at the summit, his arms raised high. A colossal circle of blood-red runes glowed violently in the earth. The sacrificial seal encompassed the entire Crimson Crest estate. Chapter 6. The storm finally broke, leaving the night sky clear and glittering with cold stars. Calliope and Vandar stepped out of the mansion's ruined front doors. Gareth stood at the center of the gravel driveway, chanting in a forgotten guttural tongue. The blood-red runes etched into the earth pulsed violently, pulling the very gravity from the air. "You are too late," Gareth laughed, his eyes completely pitch black. "The gateway is open. Give me the vessel." Calliope did not run. She did not hide. She stepped firmly in front of Vandar. She drew on the fresh, burning mate bond, pulling Vandar's towering alpha strength and combining it with the celestial pulse of her unborn child. She raised her hands. A blinding aura of starlight erupted from her skin. It swept outward in a colossal shockwave, crashing into the blood-red runes. The dark magic hissed, boiled, and then shattered into nothingness. The sacrificial circle dissolved into ash. Gareth stumbled backward, his stolen power severed. Impossible! Vandar did not give him a second to recover. The king moved faster than the human eye could track. He did not shift. He wanted to do this with his own hands. He slammed into Gareth, driving him into the stone pillar of the gate. The rogue drew a silver blade, slashing wildly. But Vandar caught his wrist. A sickening snap echoed in the quiet night as Gareth's arm broke. Vandar's hand closed tightly around Gareth's throat. He lifted the cultist off the ground, his amber eyes burning with absolute lethal calm. "You abandoned her," Vandar whispered, his grip tightening relentlessly. "You hunted her. You threatened my family." With one brutal, crushing motion, Vandar shattered Gareth's windpipe. He dropped the lifeless body to the wet gravel. It was over. The estate fell silent, save for the distant hum of the wind. From the shadows, Barnaby emerged, carrying a mop bucket and a heavy-duty trash bag. "I shall require the industrial incinerator for this one, sire," the butler murmured, dragging the remains away. Vandar stood amid the wreckage. Blood coated his knuckles. His broad chest heaved with residual adrenaline. But as he turned to face Calliope, the terrifying predator vanished. He crossed the distance, his amber eyes softening into something impossibly tender. He didn't speak. He simply scooped her up into his arms. She felt so light against his formidable strength. He carried her upstairs, walking past the shattered glass and bypassing the ruined ballroom. He brought her directly to his private quarters, the inner sanctum where no one else was allowed. Vandar set her gently on the edge of the plush, oversized bed. Calliope trembled. The adrenaline was fading rapidly, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion, but the claiming mark on her neck throbbed. It radiated a persistent, comforting heat that chased away the chill. Vandar disappeared into the adjoining bathroom. He returned moments later with a silver basin of warm water and a soft cloth. He knelt before her, the Alpha King, on his knees. He didn't say a word as he began to wash her hands. He wiped away the mud. He cleaned the soot from her palms. His touch was painstakingly gentle. It was the touch of a man holding something infinitely precious. Calliope watched his dark hair fall over his forehead. She felt the steady, resonant thrum of his pulse through their new bond. It sang to her, a deep, quiet melody of absolute devotion. The celestial light of her unborn child had settled into a peaceful hum. Safe. They were finally safe. Vandar moved the warm cloth to her cheek. He cleaned a smudge of dirt near her jawline. His thumb brushed over her lower lip, lingering there. "You are shaking," he whispered. His voice was rough, wrecked with emotion. "I am not cold," she replied softly. She reached out. Her fingers traced the sharp line of his jaw. She felt the tension coiled tight beneath his skin. He leaned into her touch, and a fractured sigh escaped his lips. He closed his eyes. "I thought I lost you," he confessed. The raw vulnerability in his tone broke her heart. When the dark magic breached the bunker, my wolf nearly tore me apart from the inside. He set the basin aside. He remained on his knees. He looked up at her, his amber eyes completely stripped of their playboy armor. There was no deception left. He reached into his inner pocket. He withdrew a pristine velvet box. It was untouched by the rain or the chaos outside. He opened it. A delicate band of white gold rested inside. A brilliant star-cut diamond sat at the center, surrounded by deep black obsidian. "I lied to you," Vandar swore, his gaze holding hers captive. I offered you a contract. I offered you a cage built of lies and gold. Calliope held her breath. But you gave me a soul, he continued, his voice vibrating with absolute sincerity. You brought light back into a world I thought was forever dark. My wolf claimed you, but the man loves you. He took her left hand. His large, calloused fingers cradled hers. No more contracts, no more rules, Vandar promised. I offer you my life. I offer you my kingdom. This child is mine, in blood and in spirit. He paused, letting the quiet intimacy stretch. The mating bond pulsed between them, thick with profound reverence. Calliope, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Will you be my true Luna? Will you marry me? Tears spilled over her lashes. They were not tears of fear. They were tears of profound, overwhelming relief. She felt the steady, calm light of her baby. She felt the warm, protective hum of the mating bond on her neck. She looked at the lethal king who worshipped the very ground she walked upon. Yes, she whispered. Vandar slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He surged upward, pulling her flush against his chest. His mouth crashed down on hers. The kiss was a vow. It was a total claiming. It tasted of rain, salt, and absolute surrender. Calliope tangled her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer. She arched into his warmth, letting the fire of their bond consume the last shadows of her past.